So U.S. Baseball won today 8-1 against Israel. Current Omaha Storm Chaser Bubba Starling had a base hit and an RBI.
All right.
As baseball is back in the Olympics. All right, as we shift here into hour number 3 of the Gary Sharp Show on a Football Friday, let's welcome in sports and entertainment attorney and a very engaging personality. Dan Lust joins us. Dan, thanks for your time. Welcome to the show.
My pleasure, Gary, and a shout-out to Husker Nation that set up this lovely interview today.
Yeah. Before we get into something you teased, I mean, you got a lot of people pretty excited. I mean, I put that on the resume. I have to ask you one quick thing. What is up with the Cleveland Guardians? Is there a mess there in their own city on the name?
There is a massive mess, and I'll take a little bit of credit for bringing some attention to it, but long and short, right, July 23rd, a week ago today, they announced the new name, Cleveland Guardians. So upon some circumstance, they say they received final clearance on the name, and there's no problems. They're good to go. Problem is, right, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, we start getting some activity from clevelandguardians.com, from an Instagram account, at Cleveland Guardians, from a Facebook page, at Cleveland Guardians, all of which are owned by a local roller derby team. So I'm not sure who cleared the name. All I can tell you is if you put into Google Yankees.com, RedSox.com, NewYorkYankees.com, they all go to the baseball page. So I'm not sure, again, who cleared it. A little premature because this roller derby team, I think, is about to get a blank check from a $1 billion team over here. But it's fascinating.
How does that happen?
I joked, and I obviously was joking. I've said Google is your best friend, right?
Yes.
Check it early and often. So, Gary, either they didn't check Google, which I think they did, or they checked it, knew that Cleveland Guardians were a local roller derby team, and just figured, no pun intended, that they would just roll over them. But this team is posting today. They're saying, hey, we're going to put merch on our website. So they're really applying the pressure here. I just find it as such a fascinating story. And just a good story, and you can be a $1 billion franchise, but still make really mistakes. So the devil is in the details here.
Now, lawyers are going to make a lot of money. They're going to be spending a lot of time on what happened last week with Oklahoma, Texas, the Big 12, the SEC, comments that are being made. ESPN is being drawn in. Draw me also how maybe the Big 10 and in particular Nebraska can be all drawn into what's going on currently on the college landscape.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating, and I think anyone listening to the show is kind of aware of the details. Formally now Oklahoma and Texas will join the SEC as of 2025, if not sooner. So that if not sooner is the really fascinating part that lawyers are circling in, right? You guys know this best. 2011 and 2012, that was musical chairs of college sports, and Nebraska obviously made their way over to the Big Ten. So, I read Bowlesby's statements very closely, and we can get into them, but kind of at a big picture level, all eyes are kind of on the Big 12, right? And I think we give Nebraska a lot of credit, outside of Nebraska, right? Those guys were paying attention to the pulse, and they made the move, I think, maybe seeing the future a little bit. So Big 12, right, what do? They can either regroup and start recruiting schools, or schools will decide to bolt and go elsewhere. So just look at the big landscape, and this is why I wanted to talk about how it affects Nebraska, right? The SEC is going to have 16 schools. The Big Ten is going to have 14 schools. If you want to keep pace and be this, the main conference in the country, you have to keep pace with the SEC. So I would think it is probable that there are some conversations occurring at Big Ten HQ about picking up a couple teams, whether that's Iowa State with a logical rival in the conference with Iowa, or Kansas just because of how close it is to Nebraska. I can certainly see that. And then, Gary, I think there's just an interesting conversation of, what is the NCAA's role in college sports moving forward if you have a conference like the SEC that basically is going to generate nearly as much annual revenue as the NCAA itself. So I think that's the fascinating question, truly, moving forward.
So let's unpack some things. Let's go back. Let's just revisit quickly last fall. Is there any lingering stuff between the Ohio States and the Nebraskas with what went on in the Big Ten last year to play or not to play that is going to linger into this upcoming fall?
I'm not sure. I made the joke on Twitter. I know Nebraska fans watch this, right? And, I'm not a tinfoil hat guy. I just point things out objectively as an attorney. I thought it was very funny. Gary, I pay attention to the nuances. no holding calls for about, a couple of years for Nebraska. I thought it was interesting, right? These are Big Ten officials. Am I going to say that's a holdover? I don't know. I'm just pointing it out, right? The numbers do not lie. But also, Gary, right? How many players from schools sued the Big Ten Conference? By my count, only one school. So, is it possible that was an impact from the lawsuit? Possible. I haven't seen any type of residual effects on Ohio State from their position of wanting to play football along with Nebraska. I believe Iowa was the third in that supposed 11-3 vote. But we'll see. I guess on a bigger picture level, and I'm telling different shows that I go on around the country, Nebraska kind of sent off a signal, right? When the Big Ten said they did not want to play college football, Scott Frost kind of sent out that message that we want to play. It doesn't matter where, we want to play. So then you have this interesting question as to, is the conference in charge or are the schools in charge? In the future of college football, do you need the conference structure or are we looking really at the schools? Because Texas and Oklahoma, right, clearly didn't care about the conference. They want to chase the money. They're chasing the school firepower. So you're just kind of looking long term, right? I mean, it may just be me, but I think the schools hold the power here, right? That's really it. So Texas and Oklahoma can tell you that, right? Bob Bowlesby kind of grasping at straws here, and he's left kind of holding the bag. When you're two blue buds, maybe the lifeblood of the conference just bolt like that.
How difficult would it be for like Ohio State to leave the Big Ten if that ever came about? We didn't think Texas and Oklahoma would leave the Big 12. It might be even further out there that Ohio State would leave the Big Ten. But how difficult would it be to leave the Big Ten?
Just look what's happening right now with Texas and Oklahoma. It is doable, but it's not going to come without its legal hurdles, right? So there's going to have to be money you pay at some point. I mean, but if we're just talking realistically, do I think Ohio State's going to leave the Big Ten Conference? No, I don't think that. I think they're the head of the table, right? The Big Ten Conference treated them very well. I think the bigger question long term, just look what the SEC is doing. They're building a super conference. Is the Big Ten going to follow suit and build a super conference around the Ohio States of the world? Possible. Is it possible also that Greg Sankey is making phone calls to the top schools in the country to create one super conference? If you know what I'm alluding to? Possible too. But you can't rule it out. Whoever would have thought that Texas and Oklahoma would go to the SEC? Again, I think all bets are off at this point.
Well, around here, you wouldn't have to convince people that Texas is a pain in the ass. I mean, we saw that a decade ago. Dan Luss joining us here on the Gary Sharp Show. So let's stick with the Big Ten real quick, because their TV contract's going to come up in 23. That's when it expires. So if you have that kind of as an end date, if you're Kevin Warren and you're the Big Ten and you're thinking about, okay, we got to get to 16, doesn't it have to happen pretty quick so that you have teams here, two new teams, if that's where you're going, or some merger, whatever happens, so that you can present to your new TV partners to try and get more money when you're going after your next deal?
I think so. And I think, Gary, that's the question, right? And I think that is I don't know, I hate to say it. I hate to give Texas some credit because I know my Nebraska followers hate Texas and they hate Iowa. But I think it was a really smart statement that they put out with Oklahoma. It said, we are not going to breach our contract before 2025, but we'll explore our options then. So that sends a signal to the remaining 8 Big 12 schools. Hey, guys, by 2025, we're out, so you might need to look for other options. So then you have the Baylors of the world, right? The Iowa States of the world, the Kansas of the world. They're looking now at all of those rights deals. And if, basically Big Ten is going to go on in 2023 with whatever new group they have, you'd kind of be crazy if you were one of those schools, an AD of those schools, to not kind of inquire, hey, what will it take for us to join the Big Ten? So that's why I think Texas and Oklahoma, again, just from a legal perspective, a very odd joint statement between two schools, which you don't see. Bob Bowlesby's statement was obviously a little odd, too. He also talked about how Texas and Oklahoma were trying to poison the well and kind of make the conference unstable so that they wouldn't have to pay those massive $100 million payment or golden parachute out. So I think Texas and Oklahoma orchestrated this, and from an exciting perspective, right? 2011, 2012 was conference musical chairs, and looks like history is about to repeat itself. So
where now bring Dan, bring ESPN into the equation, because they are brought in by Bob Bowlesby. Their statement yesterday was pretty direct. They basically said this issue is over. What happens with ESPN if you're looking at it from Bob Bowlesby and maybe suing ESPN? Where do they factor in? What is their defense or their now role?
Doesn't it sound so odd to say that out loud? Like the Big 12 suing
Yes.
ESPN. It just sounds odd. But here's the thing, right? Just a couple legal terms here. A cease and desist letter was sent from Bob Bowlesby, commissioner of the Big 12, over to ESPN. Cease and desist is a fancy way of saying stop or else, right? And what is he saying stop or else about? It's this fancy term which, I thought that's what he was saying, and then it turned out he ended up saying it's called tortious interference. If there's a contract between person A and person B, and person C, who has nothing to do with the contract, they come in and help person A get out of that contract.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lawsuit that would occur. It would occur from person B suing A for breach of contract, but then person B suing person C for helping A break the contract. So that's the mechanism of a lawsuit. I mean, it's there for the taking. And just so people know, you don't need to send a cease and desist before filing a lawsuit. There's no requirement to do it. Bowlesby says he has concrete evidence of, I guess, some tampering or facilitation between ESPN and one of the remaining Big 12 schools to help go to another conference. Whether that's true or not, I mean, I'd hope he's not making this allegation up very publicly, but that's the allegation. And, I mean, whether or not, ESPN does it again, what Bowlesby's saying is, he goes, I have enough for a lawsuit right now, but I'm giving you one shot to stop it, and then, this can be the end of the story. But definitely fascinating, I think unprecedented in sports for a conference commissioner to threaten a lawsuit against a behemoth media partner.
Yeah, the key word is partner. I mean, that's unheard of. How difficult do you think it is for Bowlesby to prove this?
I mean, listen, you got to check the receipts here, right? What is he referring to? People are saying that it's something concrete. Could that be a text message, direct message in some form of social media, an email, a recorded conversation? I mean, think about where it's coming from, right? I'm just using some speculation here, but he's supposed to be the head of the Big 12 conference. Of these remaining 8 schools, they owe their allegiance to Bowlesby. So if someone was having a conversation with someone at ESPN, I mean, just use modern communication. More often than not, there's going to be some receipt of that communication, unless it's some type of phone conversation that's not recorded. So, it's just fascinating. Again, I think this is the part where I want to just make clear to everyone. On the legal side, it was possible that there was a cease and desist and maybe expected to go from Bowlesby to Greg Sankey over at the SEC. That one makes sense, right? How did Oklahoma and Texas end up in the SEC without some kind of conversation? What no one expects is this wild card for Bowlesby to go after ESPN, possibly the facilitator in any of these conversations. So I think that was Bowlesby's actually very smart way. I'll give some credit to him to send a really loud message. Hey, yeah, who cares if we sue the SEC? We hate the SEC. But we're not afraid to sue ESPN, right? A potential mega behemoth partner. There's not that many ESPNs out there. There's maybe 2 or 3, right? And we're not even afraid to go after them. And from Bowlesby's perspective, just to kind of put a pin in it, he's kind of going scorched earth at this point, because if the Big 12 ceases to exist, there is no need for a Big 12 commissioner. So I think this is Bowlesby showing that the situation is really dire, and he had to come out swinging, which he did.
Do you really, I mean, a lot of us don't, but do you really believe that Oklahoma and Texas are another 3-4 years in the Big 12?
No, I don't. I think they orchestrated this pretty effectively. You mentioned it, this 2023 date for the grant of rights in the Big 10. These teams are looking around, right? And there's some really good schools in the Big 12 still, right? Baylor just won a national championship in basketball. If they leave, right, then you're down to 7. And let's say the Big 10 pulls Iowa State, and then there's a logical rival again between Iowa State. You're down to 6. Again, just on a numbers level, right, a quantity level, the SEC will have 16 schools, and the Big 12 now has 8 schools. So the Big 12's got to get on their horse really quick and start recruiting, or else they might, right, you go from the Power 5 to the Power 4. So, yeah, I'm just trying to play an issue spot at a high level. It would be very odd if there was just Texas and Oklahoma leaving and nobody else. I think this is going to have massive ramifications across all college sports.
All right, so the other part of this equation is the 4-letter, not ESPN, NCAA. In your opinion, you've been around this game long enough, and you know how all this works. Where are we, let's say 24-25, where is the NCAA by then?
Yeah, that's maybe the billion-dollar question here. So, Gary, I'm sure you remember back in the day. I'm a sports law historian, the College Football Association. Do you remember?
Yes, I
Remember
do.
that whole
Yes.
controversy?
Yep.
So for those that don't, that was basically a group of schools, some blue bloods, just coincidentally Oklahoma and Georgia, back in the early 80s, when they said, you know what, it is not fair that the NCAA controls all the college football television rights. We're going to create a separate entity, College Football Association, and we're going to start doing deals with the television networks. Whatever schools want to join, that's fine, and whatever ones want to stay with the NCAA television network, that's fine too. So the NCAA said, whoa, you can't do that and still compete in the NCAA. That you're going to compete with us in television rights, but then you're going to be a member of NCAA games. That's not going to happen. So that's a case that went all the way up to the Supreme Court of the United States. It's actually the last time that the Supreme Court touched college sports since this recent case, NCAA versus Alston, from a couple weeks back. But really the holding there is that what the NCAA was doing was unlawful. They couldn't threaten a group that, got together and competed for television rights. So that case law is on the book. I'm just pointing out, if these schools, if history repeated itself, and the Georgias and the Oklahomas and let's say the Nebraskas and Ohio States formed a separate association to compete with the NCAA, this case is going to be cited early and often that they are allowed to do it. It's unlawful for the NCAA to tell them that they cannot. So, the future of college football, college sports, college football seems to do pretty well without the NCAA. So I don't think it's saying something so far-fetched if college sports existed in the future. Maybe a competing entity, right? Maybe the NCAA still exists for the mid-major conferences. But I see a world where there's room for two leagues to compete with one another.
This is the first time we've had you on, and I'm curious, with your background, what's your thoughts on name, image, likeness? First of all, it happening and how it's gone in the first month, and maybe where it's going.
I guess just at a high level, I think some just interesting observations. There's football players and basketball players that have profited from this, and those are the two, big money-making, revenue-generating sports. But as you guys well know in Nebraska, right, there are some sports that people are just very passionate about, some, be it volleyball or softball or wrestling, right? I think we're seeing the basketballs and the footballs of the world profit really early. And interestingly, this third category, maybe it's the ace of the pitching staff of Nebraska baseball or maybe one high-level athlete in the lower sports. But it's really the female athletes with these big social media followings that have also been able to cash in. So those are really maybe your four categories. The top athlete on the team, football, basketball players, and then these really heavily followed female athletes on social media levels. So I find it fascinating and really the recent development that I'm kind of watching. We're looking at numbers, right? We want to know how much these deals are. Not these are really, really reported. The ones that we're seeing are maybe low six figures, high five figures for the top guys. And then we have a story that comes across, Twitter this week that when Nick Saban said that Bryce Young was actually close to signing deals close to $1 million, that actually, at least according to sources, seems accurate. 800,000 is the reported number for a guy like Bryce Young, who hasn't even played it down with the Crimson Tide. So, these numbers seem like they're getting very big, very fast.
Well, it's the other part, Dan, is crazy is you've got Ohio State's top recruit is a senior in high school playing quarterback in Texas, and because of state laws in Texas, he's thinking about leaving, not playing his senior year, going to Ohio State so he can start to take advantage of name, image, likeness, and he hasn't even played it down in college. And yet there's projected with his social media following, he could make a lot of money. I mean, it's going to make your head spin. It'll just be curious how this unfolds and how coaches handle it and how players handle it moving forward. But it hasn't killed the NCAA in a month, so I think we're okay.
Well, they told us that college sports would cease to exist if this happened, so I'm happy the NCAA was called out on that lie very quickly.
All right. One final thing, when it's all said and done, how will and I know you're doing stuff and you like the Nebraska brand and you like talking to Nebraska fans. At the end of the day, how should Nebraska fans feel about their relationship with the Big Ten moving forward?
I think some of these hands were kind of displayed during this, we'll say, the Big Ten voting saga last year, the whole Chattanooga incident. I think it was pretty clear, right? The Chattanooga thing was a no-brainer. They should have been able to play Chattanooga. And then when the vote came out against them, you had the national media really torpedoing Nebraska for, God forbid, trying to play a non-conference game, which I think this was what started my affinity with Nebraska Nation. I just pointed it out, it made no sense that they were being made fun of. So, I just objectively, I see these comments from the national perspective don't make sense. I see it from people within the Big Ten that doesn't necessarily make sense. So we'll see. I mean, from a monetary perspective, I think it's a no-brainer. I think you hang in the Big Ten. But, hopefully the tides improve and hopefully the politics improve where Nebraska is not treated like this, the younger brother as being kind of the new blood in the conference. Similar, maybe a little bit, Gary, how Texas A&M, I think, had some maybe concerns about letting Texas and Oklahoma in, but they were the kid brother, I guess, in SEC, and they ended up going along with the vote. So, I think the longer Nebraska's in the conference, the better it will get. But, not so happy with how it's been recently.
Dan, as always, I appreciate it. Thank you, and we'll talk down the road as more things unfold. And we're talking about the NCAA and college athletics, so it's something on a daily basis.
My pleasure, Gary. GBR.
That's Dan Lust. You can follow him on Twitter at SportsLawLust, breaking down all the topics that are going on, especially right now. Lawyers are involved with the Big 12, ESPN, and the SEC. All right, when we come back, we got still lots to discuss. We got the NBA, we got Major League Baseball. 3 p.m. is the trade deadline, and the first day of camp in Lincoln. Plus, Banton, Zagorowski are now professional basketball players. Dirk Chatelain stops by at 1. I'm sure he has a thought or two, and this will be the first time we talk to Dirk in a while. He will come on here, and we will sing The Eyes of Texas together about our love of UT. That'll be fun. That's coming up at 1. It's the Gary Sharp Show with George at 1620 The Zone.